Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little bit different today, and honestly, I think this might be one of the most, well, intense topics we've ever covered.
I think you might be right.
Usually when we say the word Renaissance or the Golden Age, you have a very specific image in your head. Yeah.
It's the standard marketing package, isn't it? Italian sunlight, marble statues, Michelangelo up on a scaffold.
Exactly. You know, a glass of wine on a piazza in Florence, this general feeling of humanity waking up, stretching, realizing its own greatness. It's a rebranding exercise, the rebirth.
Right, light finally breaking after the so-called Dark Ages.
But today, we're going to scrape off that gold paint. We're looking at a specific place and a specific time, Poland in the 15th and 16th centuries. And the picture we get from our source material, specifically Chapter 2, Odrodzenie, or the Renaissance, from the Historia Philadelphii Polskij, it isn't bright and airy. It's filled with anxiety. It's dark.
It really is. It's a period where the smartest people in the room aren't celebrating at all. They're panicking.
That's such a great way to put it. It's a fascinating juxtaposition and one that I think is often overlooked.
Well, you have the external appearance of the golden age of Polish culture. You know, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth is a major European power. The grain trade is booming. The nobility is getting incredibly wealthy.
Everything on the surface looks great.
Everything on the surface looks fantastic. But intellectually, philosophically, there's this undercurrent of immense dread.
It's like walking into this grand mansion where the party is in full swing, you know, champagne is flowing, but the architects are down in the basement looking at the blueprints and realizing the whole foundation is cracking.
That's a perfect analogy. And they're screaming up the stairs, but the music is just too loud for anyone to hear them.
So that's our mission today. We are going to unpack this very specific transition. We're focusing on the text from pages 55 through 100 of our source. We're going to look at these battles fought over the human soul, the diagnosis of a dying state, and this terrifying concept that you've highlighted called anthropocentrism.
Which, on paper, sounds like a good thing, man at the center.
Right. It sounds like progress. But as we'll see, it's actually kind of a nightmare. So let's set the stage properly. We're moving from medieval scholasticism to the humanist breakthrough. What is the core tension here? Why is man at the center so scary for them?
To really understand the fear, you have to appreciate what came before. In the medieval worldview, what we call theocentrism, everything is structured around God.
Everything has its place.
Everything. The church is the ultimate authority on truth. The social hierarchy is divinely ordained and fixed, and your place in the universe is secure. You might be a peasant, you might be poor, life is probably brutal and short, but you know the rules. You know the roadmap to salvation.
It's a safety net, a cosmic safety net.
It is an absolute safety net. But then the Renaissance brings this shift to anthropocentrism, man-centeredness. And while that sounds empowering, you know, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul, it completely removes that net. If you remove the absolute structure of the church as the sole authority on, well, everything, humans are suddenly left alone. They have to govern themselves. They have to face their own mortality without the guaranteed comfort of the old dogmas.
It's like being a teenager who finally moves out of their parents' house.
Yeah.
You scream for freedom, you finally get your own apartment, and then the first night you're there, you realize you have to pay the rent, you have to figure out how to fix the furnace, you don't know how the electricity works, and you're all alone in the dark.
And in the case of 16th century Poland, the apartment is also on fire.
Right.
That is the feeling many of these Polish thinkers had. They looked at man in the abstract, and they didn't see a glorious demigod. They saw a chaotic, selfish, dangerous animal that needed to be managed. When God steps back in the philosophical framework, the silence that follows is terrifying.
Okay, so let's talk about how this virus of new ideas actually got into Poland. Because it wasn't a homegrown thing, was it? This didn't just bubble up in Krakow out of nowhere.
No, absolutely not. It was an import. In many ways, it was an invasion of ideas. You had these fascinating characters known as wandering humanists.
Wandering humanists.
Men like Filippo Buonaccorsi, who was much better known as Callimachus, or Conrad Celtes. These were intellectual nomads traveling from court to court, university to university, spreading the new learning.
I love that image. It sounds like a character from a Western, but instead of a six-shooter, he's got a bag full of forbidden books and dangerous syntax.
In a way, they were more dangerous than gunmen. Callimachus, for instance, had to flee Rome because he was implicated in a plot against the Pope.
So he's not just some quiet scholar.
He's a political radical. He comes to Poland, gets a job as a tutor to the king's sons, and starts spreading these ideas that directly challenge the stagnation of the old Krakow Academy. But the real vector of infection, to use your virus metaphor, were the sons of the nobility.
The original study abroad program.
Precisely. The wealthy youth, the sons of the magnates and the rich gentry, they went to Italy. They went to Padua, to Bologna. They saw a different world. They studied Roman law. They studied medicine. They studied the new philosophy, the new art.
And then they came home.
And when they came back to Poland, they brought those dangerous ideas with them. They looked at the old scholastic professors in Krakow, endlessly debating the same dry commentaries on Aristotle, and they said, this isn't enough anymore. This is dead.
So let's paint the picture for you, the listener. Imagine a world where the old, trusted maps of reality are on fire. Everyone is scrambling to draw new ones before the lights go out completely. That's the setting. And the first battleground in this new war of ideas is the human soul itself. Which brings us to section 1 of our deep dives, the prisoner's soul. We're talking about a resurgence of Platonism.
Specifically, the shift away from Aristotle and toward Plato.
Now, I took Philosophy 101, so I know Plato means caves and ideal forms. But in this context, why is Plato darker than Aristotle? I always thought Aristotle was the dry, logic-chopping one.
Aristotle was the darling of the medieval church for a reason. He was safe, he was logical, he was systematic, he categorized everything. He made the world feel orderly and understandable. But the Renaissance thinkers in Poland, they started drifting toward Neoplatonism. And Neoplatonism, while it can be mystical and beautiful, offers a profound sense of alienation.
Alienation, how so?
In the Neoplatonic view that they adopted, the soul isn't just a part of you, it's a prisoner. It's a divine spark, a wanderer from a higher, perfect realm that has fallen into the mud of the physical body.
So your body is a jail cell.
Your body is a cage, and the soul is desperate to escape, desperate to return to its source. It turns existence into a prison break movie. You're trapped in this biological machine, and everything about your daily life, eating, sleeping, aging, getting sick, is just the bars of that cage rattling.
That is a heavy way to live. So let's look at one of the thinkers leading this charge, Adam Pollack, or in Latin, Adamus Polonus. He writes this text with a ridiculously long title, Dialogus de Quatuor Statuum, which is basically a dialogue on 4 states disputing immortality.
Yes, and this is a fascinating text because it takes the entire medieval hierarchy of spiritual value and just flips it on its head. He stages a debate. Who deserves immortality the most? Who is closest to the divine?
Okay, in the medieval mindset, the answer to that is obvious. It's the monk. It's the priest. The person who locks themselves away in a cell, rejects the world, practices celibacy, and prays all day. Asceticism is the gold standard.
Exactly. Withdrawal from the world was the path to God. But Adam Pollack argues that the married person, the one who is engaged in the messy biological, social reality of life, is actually ranked higher than the celibate clergy.
Okay, that's a huge scandal waiting to happen. Why would he think that? Is he just trying to pick a fight with the bishops?
It's deeper than that, and it's really quite radical. It comes down to a redefinition of what immortality even is. Pollack was a physician, a medical man. He looked at the world through a biological lens. He saw that individual survival is, well, it's uncertain. The individual dies. The body rots.
That's a given.
But the species, the human race, that continues. He starts talking about a kind of biological immortality.
So by having children, by participating in the great chain of life, you're achieving a truer, more real form of immortality than the monk who just dies and leaves nothing behind.
Precisely. It strips away the purely spiritual, abstract veneer of immortality. It suggests it isn't this magical transportation of your consciousness to heaven, but a tangible biological and social continuity on Earth. For a deeply religious society, that is a terrifying thought.
Why terrifying?
Because it implies that your individual soul, your personal consciousness, might not matter as much as the survival of the human collective. It decenters the individual's salvation story.
It's almost evolutionary. It's putting the focus on the continuation of the gene pool rather than the salvation of the ghost in the machine.
It is. And he extends this to the idea of love, too. Not the ethereal, spiritual love of God, but real, physical, sensual love between people. He views it as a natural force, like gravity. It's the glue that binds the species together and ensures its continuation. It's a powerful move away from the sky and down into the earth.
This theme seems to connect to 2 other thinkers mentioned in the text, Wallenty Eck and Jerzy Livon. They have this really grim view of reality where the soul is on a borderland.
That phrase perfectly encapsulates the anxiety of the age. Eck writes a dialogue called De Mundi Contemptuon, Contempt for the World. They see the human soul as standing on a razor's edge. On one side, you have the mud of earthly existence, sickness, death, politics, corruption, the decay of the body.
And on the other?
On the other side, you have the pure, eternal realm of knowledge, virtue, and the divine. And you're caught in the middle.
Contempt for the world. That really doesn't sound like the motto for a golden age.
It's the opposite. It's the feeling that the world is a trap. You desperately want to escape upwards through knowledge, through philosophy, through virtue. But your body, with all its needs and weaknesses, keeps pulling you back down into the mud. It creates this profound psychological split. You are constantly at war with your own nature. It's not a celebration of humanity. It's a struggle against the very condition of being human.
So on one hand, you have the Platonists feeling trapped in their bodies, looking up at the stars for an escape. But then you have the Aristotelians who are looking right at the body and saying, hang on a second.
Yeah.
What if this is all there is?
Exactly.
This takes us to section 2, the mortal body.
Right. Because while Platonism was the new cool for the wandering humanists and the poets, the universities were still haunted by the ghost of scholasticism. But it wasn't the old, safe scholasticism of Thomas Aquinas anymore. It was a new, dangerous breed coming out of Italy.
The Paduan influence.
Yeah.
I'm coming back to Padua. It seems like it was the Silicon Valley of dangerous 16th century ideas.
It absolutely was. Padua was the leading center for medical and philosophical innovation in Europe, and there was a massive high-stakes debate going on there between two camps, the Averroists and the Alexandrists.
Okay, break that down for us. What were they fighting about?
They were fighting about the mortality of the soul.
That seems like a pretty big thing to disagree on in Catholic Europe.
It's the biggest thing. The Averroists, following the Arab philosopher Averroes, argued for something called a shared intellect. The idea was that there's one universal intellect, and our individual minds are just temporary participants in it. When you die, your personal consciousness, your personality, it vanishes. You just merge back into the collective.
So no personal afterlife.
No personal afterlife. But the Alexandrists, following Alexander of Aphrodisias, were even more blunt. They were often physicians and naturalists, and they argued that the soul is just the form of the body.
The form, like the shape of something.
Exactly like the shape of something. Think of a wax seal pressed into a letter. The shape on the seal is its form. But if you melt the wax, if the body dies, the shape is gone. The soul isn't a separate ghost living in the machine. It's just the organization and function of your physical matter.
Wow, that is existential dread level 100. If you even begin to entertain that idea, then everything changes. There's no judgment day, no heaven, no hell, no reunion with grandma, just lights out.
Complete annihilation. And this is the intellectual climate that Polish thinkers are being exposed to in Padua. This brings us to Jan Sturziani. He writes a book called De Natura et Dignitate Hominis, on the nature and dignity of man. He's desperately trying to fight off this dread.
So how does he do it? If the afterlife is now a question mark, where does our dignity come from?
He argues that human dignity comes from being a co-creator with God.
A co-creator. That's quite a promotion from humble servant.
It's a massive promotion. He says, look, God created nature, the raw material of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But humans, we create a second world on top of that. We create culture, art, laws, cities, technology. We manipulate nature. That is our unique dignity. We are the beings who finish God's work.
But reading between the lines, like you said, you can feel the desperation there. It's like, if we aren't sure about the immortality of the soul, we have to find meaning here.
Mm-hmm.
We have to build things that last, because we might not.
It's a huge shift in focus. It creates this immense pressure to achieve. If heaven isn't the guaranteed reward, then you better leave a really impressive cathedral or a brilliant book or a well-ordered state behind. It's this very modern idea that you have to justify your existence through your work and your creations.
And this earthly focus, this practical side, nobody embodies that more than Sebastian Petrusy of Pilsno. He seems like a really fascinating character.
He is one of my favorites in this whole chapter. He's a physician-philosopher.
I love that combination. He's a man who deals with sickness, injury, and death every single day, and then he goes home to translate Aristotle. That has to shape your worldview.
It absolutely does. His medical background colors his entire philosophy. He looks at the Polish people and the nobility in particular, and he doesn't see a glorious nation of heroes. He sees a patient, a very sick patient.
He's making a diagnosis.
Yes, a social diagnosis. He views the common people, and especially the nobility, as psychologically unwell. They're ruled by passions, by greed, by irrationality, by bad habits. So what does he do? He prescribes virtue. But, and this is the key, it's not virtue to get into heaven. It's virtue as a survival mechanism.
So be good or you'll die, or at least be rational or you'll destroy yourself.
Essentially, be rational or your society will collapse. He completely rejects abstract metaphysics. He has no time for questions like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. He cares about ethics, politics, and economics, practical stuff that can heal the sick body of the Commonwealth.
And he translates Aristotle into Polish, which you mentioned was radical. Why was that so important?
Because for centuries, philosophy was locked away in Latin. It was the exclusive property of the clergy and a handful of university professors. By translating Aristotle's practical works, the ethics, the politics, into the vernacular, into Polish, he's trying to give the medicine directly to the patient. He wants the ordinary nobleman, the deputy in the Sèvres, to read it and be cured of his ignorance.
He has this very cold, almost mathematical view of justice, doesn't he? It's not about fairness in some fuzzy emotional sense.
Not at all. It's justice as math. He breaks it down into distributive justice versus compensatory justice. It's all about balance and proportion. If you take X, you must repay Y. If you hold public office A, you must possess merit B. It's a system, an algorithm for a healthy society. And this logical approach leads him to a very dangerous political view regarding the king.
The idea of the king on a leash.
Patricy argues very forcefully that the king must be a servant to the law. The law is the ultimate rational authority, not the monarch's whim. If the king breaks the law, he ceases to be a king and becomes a tyrant. And a tyrant is a diseased organ in the body politic that must be dealt with.
Writing that in a monarchy, even one like Poland's, must have taken some guts.
It does. But you have to remember, Poland was a specific kind of monarchy, an elective monarchy, a noble democracy. The king was already relatively weak compared to, say, the King of France. But Patricy isn't just arguing for the nobles' power. He's arguing for the rule of rational law over everyone. He thinks the nobles are just as sick as a potential tyrant if they don't follow the law. He sees the state as a biological organism and the law is its immune system.
This metaphor of the sick state really seems to be the central theme, and it absolutely explodes with our next thinker. Section 3. The Giant. Odrodzenie Madziowski.
Odrodzenie is the heavy hitter, no question. His work De Republika Emendanda on the improvement of the Commonwealth is probably the single most significant political text of the entire Polish Renaissance.
And again, just look in the title, on the improvement of the Commonwealth. It implies something is broken. You don't improve something that's perfect, you fix something that is fundamentally broken.
Exactly. The title itself is a diagnosis. Madziewski treats the Polish state not as a glorious kingdom, but as a patient in critical condition, dying of multiple organ failure. He looks at the social structure, the laws, the church, the schools, and he sees rot everywhere.
Let's talk about the specific symptom he identifies that makes him scream the loudest. This is in his earlier treatise, Lassius, and it concerns the inequality of the law regarding homicide.
This is visceral stuff, and it's important for you, the listener, to understand the brutal reality here. In 16th century Poland, if a nobleman killed a peasant, he paid a fine. It was called a gościzna, a head tax.
A fine? You mean like a speeding ticket for killing a person?
Essentially, yes. The amount varied, but it was basically blood money. You kill a human being, a father, a farmer, a worker, and you pay the family a fee and you walk away. No prison, no execution. But if a peasant killed a noble...
I'm guessing it wasn't a fine.
Instant execution, often preceded by torture. The disparity was absolute, and it was enshrined in law. Madziewski looks at the system and he just screams into the void. He calls it what it is, barbarism. He argues that this one law destroys the very concept of a state.
Why? What's his argument?
Because if the law does not protect every member of the body politic equally, then it is not law, it is just the rule of the strong over the weak. He uses that organic metaphor again and again. He says the peasants are the feet and hands of the nation. They are the literal body that does the work. If the head, the nobility, allows the body to be brutalized and killed without consequence, then the head is insane. It's starving itself. It's an autoimmune disease. He demands that all citizens, noble and peasant, be equal before the criminal law.
That is an astonishingly revolutionary idea for the 16th century. Equality before the law. That's the kind of stuff you hear in the French and American revolutions over 200 years later.
It is, and it made him a lot of enemies. The nobility did not want equality. Their entire identity was based on privilege. But he didn't start with the nobles. He went after the church just as hard.
The source material brings up the 3 lost books, or I guess the 3 books that got banned.
Yes. When the first complete edition of the Republica Emendanda was being published in Krakow, it was censored by the church. They physically cut out 3 of the 5 books: on the church, on the school, and on war.
Okay, on the church, I can guess.
Yeah.
What was he saying that was so dangerous?
He proposed stripping the church of its political and judicial power. He argued that the church should focus on spiritual matters and get out of the business of politics and land ownership. He wanted a national church that was more independent of Rome and more accountable to the Polish state. He essentially wanted to separate church and state.
A cardinal sin at the time? What about on the school? Why was that so threatening?
Because Malczewski understood that if you want to reform the state, you have to reform the citizen. He wanted the schools, which were controlled by the church, to stop just producing clerics and start producing educated, responsible citizens. He wanted them to teach ethics, law, and history, not just theology. He saw education as a tool for state building.
He had this idea that you need a reform of customs before a reform of laws. What exactly does he mean by that?
It connects back to Petrucci's idea of the sick patient. Malczewski realized a fundamental truth about politics. You can write the best, most just laws in the world. You can draft the perfect constitution. But if the people themselves, if their customs are corrupt, they will just find ways around the laws. They'll bribe judges. They'll use their influence. They'll ignore their duties.
So the culture eats the Constitution for breakfast.
Exactly. Malczewski argued that you have to fix the morality of the nation first. You have to fix the education. You have to fix the soul of the citizen. Otherwise, the best laws in the world are just ink on paper.
It sounds like as time went on, Malczewski became more and more isolated. He was the brilliant doctor with the cure, but the patient just refused to take the medicine.
It's a deeply tragic story. He was attacked from all sides. The nobles hated his ideas about equality. The church hated his ideas about its power. He drifted toward theological heresy, becoming sympathetic to the Unitarians, the Polish Brethren, who doubted the doctrine of the Trinity. That was the nuclear option of heresy in a Catholic country. By the end of his life, he was a lonely, embittered figure, the doctor screaming at the patient to stop drinking poison, and the patient just laughed and poured another glass.
And while Malczewski is screaming for reform, equality, and reason, there's another guy screaming just as loud, but for the exact opposite things.
Yeah.
This brings us to Section 4, the theocratic nightmare, Stanisław Odrodzenie.
The antagonist. It's a sad story, really, because Odrodzenie and Malczewski started out as friends. They studied together in Germany. They were part of the same intellectual elite. But Odrodzenie took a radically different path. He became the fanatical defender of the status quo, or rather, an even more extreme version of it.
The source text describes his political vision as a geometry of power, a triangle.
Yes, he loved simple, brutal, geometric logic. Picture a triangle. At the very top apex, you have the altar, the symbol of God's authority. At one bottom corner, you have the pope or the priest. At the other bottom corner, you have the king.
Okay, so how does the power flow in this triangle?
Odrozienie's logic is this. The king kneels before the priest because the priest has the power of salvation. The priest kneels before the altar because he is God's servant. Therefore, all secular power, the power of the king, must be completely subservient to the spiritual power of the church. It is a blueprint for a total theocracy.
So while Malczewski is shouting, get the church out of politics, Odrodzenie is shouting, the church is politics and everything else is subordinate.
Precisely. And he weaponizes this idea against anyone he considers an outsider. This is where the xenophobia comes in, and it gets very dark. Odrodzenie views the Polish Commonwealth as a closed, holy vessel, a Catholic fortress. It is perfect as it is, but it's being polluted.
Polluted by what?
By foreign ideas, specifically the Reformation, Protestantism. He attacks the idea of religious tolerance, which was actually quite strong in Poland at the time. He views these newcomers, these heretics, as a disease.
He sounds like he wants to build a wall and purge the kingdom.
Metaphorically, yes. He argues that a heretic cannot be a true citizen. If you are not a loyal Catholic, you cannot be a loyal Pole. He attacks the foreign virus of ideas that we talked about earlier. He wants to purge the state of all diversity of thought and faith in order to save it. He sees the state as a body that is violently rejecting a foreign transplant.
And then looming over both Malczewski's rational pleas and Odrodzenie's fanaticism is the prophet of doom himself.
Here.
Skarga. Even if you don't know Polish philosophy, you might know the famous 19th century painting of him by Jan Matejko, this imposing figure in black Jesuit robes, arms raised, screaming at the king and the nobility, who are all looking bored or annoyed or just plotting amongst themselves.
That painting perfectly captures the essence of Skarga's most famous work, the Kazanie Sejmo, or Sermons to the Diet. But here's the crucial thing to understand. Skarga wasn't just writing a dry political treatise. He was delivering these as sermons. He was a preacher, and he was screaming in terror.
What was he so terrified of?
The sinking ship. That is his master metaphor, and it is one of the most powerful in Polish literature. He describes Poland not as a golden empire, but as a ship taking on water in a storm. And the passengers, the nobility, are not manning the pumps. They are not patching the leaks. They are down below, fighting over their luggage. They're looting the ship's pantry while the water is rising around their ankles.
That is a haunting image. It's the Titanic. But the first-class passengers are the ones drilling holes in the hull to get at the silverware.
It is. And Skarga takes direct aim at the thing the nobles were most proud of, their golden liberty, the Złota Wolność. He renames it. He calls it diabolical freedom.
Diabolical freedom. That sounds like a heavy metal album title. What does he mean by it?
He means freedom without responsibility, freedom without civic virtue, the freedom of a nobleman to use the liberum veto to block any law for any selfish reason, the freedom to oppress their peasants, the freedom to ignore the needs of the state. He argues that this unlimited, unchecked freedom leads inevitably to anarchy, and anarchy, he thunders, leads to the death of the nation.
He also uses that organic metaphor of the body politic, right? But it sounds like his version is much harsher.
Yes, it's more violent than Petrus's clinical medical view. Skarga views dissent, religious dissent, political dissent, as a cancer growing on the body of the Commonwealth. And what do you do with cancer? You don't reason with it. You don't give it vitamins. You cut it out with a knife. He calls for a strong, centralized, almost authoritarian hand to enforce unity of faith and purpose.
It's chilling to read because... Well, with the benefit of hindsight, we know he was right.
He was terrifyingly right. That's what makes his sermons so powerful and so scary even today. He predicted the fall of the state with chilling accuracy. He listed the sins of the republic: private greed over public good, internal discord, religious strife, a weak executive. And he said, "This will kill you. Your neighbors are watching, and when you are weak enough, they will devour you." And 200 years later, during the partitions of Poland, people look back at Skarga's sermons and said, "He told us. He warned us."
So we have the soul in prison, the body as a mortal machine, the state as a sinking ship. The picture is getting darker and darker. Now let's look at the universe itself. Section 5. The cold universe. Now we have to talk about the man who literally moved the earth. Mikhail Copernicus.
Now, usually when we talk about Copernicus, we jump straight to De Revolutionibus, the planets, the sun, the heliocentric theory. But the source text we're using makes a point of highlighting another, less famous aspect of his work. His treatise, Monetae Cudendi Ratio, on the minting of coin.
Right, the economic horror.
Copernicus was a true Renaissance man, a polymath. He wasn't just an astronomer. And he identified bad money, debased currency, rampant inflation, as one of the 4 great plagues that can destroy a kingdom.
Wait, hold on. Bad money's up there on a list with the other 3 plagues, which were what? Discord, mortality, and barrenness of the land.
For a state, yes. Think about it. If the money becomes worthless, all trust in the economy collapses. Trade grinds to a halt. The social order unravels. Copernicus saw this economic instability as a fundamental existential threat. He even formulated what we now call Gresham's law, that bad money drives out good.
You spend the junk and you hoard the real silver.
Precisely. The whole economy becomes a shell game, and the state rots from the inside out. But we do have to touch on the cosmic horror of his main discovery. The source mentions this key concept of displacement.
Yes, let's unpack that.
This brings us right back to that existential anxiety we started with. In the pre-Copernican universe, man is at the center of everything, literally. God's eye is fixed right on us here on Earth. The sun spins for us. The stars are a beautiful ceiling painted for our benefit.
We are the main character in the cosmic movie.
We are the star of the show. Copernicus rewrites the script, and suddenly we're just on a rock. A medium-sized rock spinning around a run-of-the-mill star in a vast, cold, silent void. We are displaced. We are no longer the center of anything.
That kind of cosmic demotion has to feed into the stoicism that we see in a thinker like Adam Bursky.
It absolutely does. Adam Bursky writes a book called Dialectica Ciceronis. In a world where everything is being thrown into doubt, he retreats to stoicism. Why? Because if the universe is chaotic and the state is rotting, the only thing you can control is your own mind.
And his big fear is that the world is deceiving us.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. If my own eyes tell me every single day that the sun moves across the sky, and then Copernicus comes along with his math and tells me, actually, you're the one who's moving at incredible speed,
Mm.
then my senses are lying to me.
And if your senses can lie about something that fundamental,
What else are they lying about? Are they lying about God? About the nature of justice? About love? Brisky argues for a cold, hard dialectic, a rigorous, empirical method for finding truth, because the world, as we perceive it, is a deceptive place. It's a retreat into a fortress of logic to protect yourself from a chaotic, untrustworthy universe. It's saying, I can't trust the world, so I will only trust my reason.
it really feels like every one of these thinkers is desperate looking for an escape hatch.
Mm.
Odrodzenie wants to escape into a perfectly rational legal system. Scargo wants to escape into absolute faith and obedience. Brisky wants to escape into pure logic. And then you have the guys who just want to find a practical escape, a way to live through the chaos.
Yes, Section 6, the practical escape, Epicureanism and the art of living.
This seems like the most subversive response of all. And it starts with a man named Grigoris Sinoka. He was an archbishop. But he secretly, or not so secretly, harbored Epicurean views.
An Epicurean archbishop, it sounds like a complete contradiction in terms, doesn't it?
It really does.
But he was a precursor to this whole movement. He rejected what he called the cobwebs of scholasticism. He focused on the body, on good health, on enjoying the material world, on witty conversation and good wine.
So why was that considered subversive? It just sounds like he wanted to have a nice life.
Because the entire Christian moral framework was built on the idea that suffering in this life is good. It earns you merit. It buys you happiness in the afterlife. Epicureanism flips that completely. It says, no, happiness here and now is the goal. Suggests that suffering is just. Suffering, it's bad. It devalues the currency of martyrdom and asceticism. It challenges the entire economy of salvation by saying, why be miserable for a theoretical afterlife when you can be happy in this garden right now?
And finally, that brings us to Łukasz Gornicki and his book, Odrodzenie Polski, the Polish courtier. This is an adaptation of a famous Italian text, right?
Yes, it's an adaptation of Baldassare Castiglione's The Courtier. But Gornicki isn't just translating it. He's adapting it to the much rougher, more violent, and chaotic reality of the Polish nobility. And here, the escape is the mask.
The mask.
The ideal courtier is a performance. He is polished, witty, graceful. He knows how to speak, how to dress, how to navigate treacherous social situations, how to hide his true feelings behind a veil of charm and nonchalance, what they called sprezzatura. In a world of brutal political infighting and diabolical freedom, the courtier's persona is a survival tool. You put on the mask of civility to navigate the chaos without getting destroyed.
So it's about creating a personal bubble of order and beauty around yourself, even if the world just outside that bubble is on fire.
It is. It's pretending everything is fine while the ship is, in fact, sinking. Or, perhaps more charitably, it's the belief that if enough of us put on the mask and pretend to be civilized, maybe, just maybe, we'll actually become civilized. It's fake it till you make it, applied to civilization itself, a desperate final attempt to impose form on chaos.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We started this deep dive talking about the Golden Age, but the picture we found wasn't gold at all.
We found rust. We found rot. We found a patient dying of organ failure. We found a soul terrified of its own mortality and its own insignificance. The Renaissance in Poland wasn't a party. It was a crisis. It was a period of intense intellectual and spiritual upheaval where the smartest minds were grappling with the potential end of their world.
And the so what here, the reason this matters, is huge. Because these guys, Modziowski, Skarga, Pitrasi, they weren't just complaining into the void. They were diagnosing the exact political and social diseases that would eventually kill the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
That is the ultimate tragedy of this whole story. They saw it all coming. They saw the crippling effects of inequality. They saw how a weak executive power would lead to paralysis. They saw the lack of civic responsibility. They saw the dangers of religious fanaticism and xenophobia. They wrote the prescriptions. Fix the law. Educate the citizens, create a strong, just government.
And the patient.
The patient refused to take the medicine. The nobility clung to their golden liberty until it became the toxic, diabolical freedom that Skarga warned about. And 200 years later, the powerful, absolutist empires on their borders, Russia, Prussia, Austria, came in and partitioned the country completely out of existence.
Just a profound lesson in missed opportunities. The smartest minds of the Golden Age saw the iceberg. They were on the bridge, pointing at it. They drew diagrams of it. They screamed about it.
Yeah.
And the ship of state just sailed right into it at full speed.
It raises a chilling question for us today, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And that is where I want to leave you, our listeners. If the smartest minds of the Polish Golden Age saw the end coming and couldn't stop it, what diabolical freedoms are we clinging to today? What are the diagnoses our experts, our scientists, our thinkers are screaming about that we're ignoring because we were too busy fighting over the luggage on our own sinking ship?
Are we the patient refusing the medicine?
Something to mull over. Dive deep, stay curious, and watch out for the sinking ship. Thanks for listening.